What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are always my great co-hosts, Fede Perez, Maria Britos, and Ralph Hanna. And guys, we're almost at the end of the year, and it's crazy to believe that there are still things going on in the world of football, especially in Paraguay. I mean, you know, there's been drama, I guess you would say, in Europe for a certain manager possibly getting sacked in England, but we'll get to that on another time. That's for another podcast, another show. Let's focus on what's really been going on in our Paraguayan game. Obviously, as we speak, we are talking literally a week removed since the announcement of our new managers, or should I say twins? I think that's a first as well, having twins on the national team. But obviously, we're going to talk about what Guillermo Barros Schelotto, who is officially the new manager of the Paraguayan national team, had to say. He had his first introductory press conference over the weekend at the APF. Obviously, we can talk about what kind of list we're going to get, some surprising players, what to expect, actually, because of the system that he plays, which might factor certain players who play on the national team. We'll obviously talk about what's going on in the league action with the Clausura heating up towards the end, a big Super Clásico happening on the weekend on Halloween, no less, and talking about what's going on in the Intermedia as the second division. It comes to a close today as the time of recording. So, you know, a lot of things going on in the game. I'm super excited to get this chat going. Let's go all the way to the mother country, to Fede Perez, where, you know, I think it feels a bit weird now, obviously, talking about what's going on with our national team. You know, it was good that we spoke about Guillermo Schelotto and the situation the national team happened last week, but now it's official, and now we're going to see what this new coach and what this new, you know, cuerpo técnico, as you say here, technical staff in Paraguay is going to bring, because from what I saw from the press conference, what I heard, I think this is a guy that is actually serious about what he's trying to do, which is obviously qualify for the World Cup.
Yeah, he looks a little bit more determined, right? Hi, Roberto. Hi, Ralph. Hi, Maria. You know, we got good feelings. We got a good vibe out of our new coaching staff. Schelotto came with his speech. I think he was very clear about what he wanted to say. And he didn't really answer much of the questions. He had his speech going, and he's very intelligent with media. He's handled it along his career. He's kind of used to the cameras and stuff like that. So I think he's going to handle himself very well. You know, he does have his temper. He's known for that also. So if he doesn't start winning, I think we're going to see the worst out of him very soon. Hopefully he's able to turn it around. But yeah, they're already working here. They're already watching games, seeing players from the local league. They've been at most of the games that were played in these last couple of games. So we're going to talk about that. Roberto, the tournaments are coming to an end. Also, the second division was decided. Last round of games were played, and you know, the top division, just like you said, it has a Super Clásico. Hopefully, it's not a spooky one. Hopefully, it's a good one in this Halloween coming up this weekend. Teams are deciding their fate for 2022 also, because of relegation points, everything that's going on around what has to do with the end of the year also. So, you know, we got a lot of sports going on. We got a lot of decision going on here in Paraguay. It's that kind of time of the year. We're close to the end of the season. We're close to the end of the year, and it's time to kind of enjoy these games. You know, we're getting very passionate games. We're getting very fun games, and we got a lot to share with our Guarani Vision listeners.
Well, going into, I guess, the Halloween reference, and I want to go to Maria on this one, because it's been quite a spooky and haunted year for Olimpia. But having said that, obviously the big game of the weekend is El Super Clásico, and obviously it's a different Super Clásico. When I mentioned before at the start of before we went on the air, they're looking at two different sides. You got Cedro's side is obviously competing for winning that title with Guarani, and you got an Olympia side that had probably its worst year in such a long time. But having said that, in a way to, I guess, remove the ghost of what happened over this year, I think certainly a Super Clásico win, no matter what type of team and performance and the year that teams have had, a Clásico is a Clásico, and you always want to go out to win these type of games.
Absolutely. Hey guys, how are you? And I agree with you there, Roberto. This has been a very haunting year for Olimpia. And, you know, with their last game against Guarani, you know, it was a terrible game again, and they're last in the table. Not surprising, you know, at this point. But when it comes to a Clásico, like you said, you have to go with everything that you have. And I think that if they actually put their game together and they actually win this Clásico, that maybe there's going to be a little bit of faith in the fans for Olimpia. Not faith in the season, because the season's over for them, but faith in that they're actually there, that, they're still alive a little bit. So we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to watching that, even though my heart will probably break anyways.
Well, I guess you couldn't say that their season isn't technically over. They're still fighting for positions in the qualifications for tournaments like the Libertadores and Sudamericana. So obviously, more than just beating Cerro and obviously getting this kind of bragging rights, they're still in a position to actually qualify for a tournament next year. So, they still have that to their mind. And obviously going to Rao here as well, as we look at what's going on in the league, certainly as we as Fede had mentioned it, titles are being decided. We added, as we spoke at the top of the show, the Intermedia, the second division of Paraguay, has officially its 3 teams that will be promoted. We have General Caballero, who are the champions, Resistencia, and Tacuaru back to the first division of Paraguay. And we have a playoff where it appears that it's going to be Sportivo Emiliano taking on a team from obviously the Paraguayan first division in a playoff. We still don't know who it's going to be. There's still a fight between obviously River Plate. We have Sportivo Luqueño. We have Sol America as well in this fight. So, I think it's more than now to figure out what's going on in the first division. We got to see who really is fighting for survival, because this is something that I think a lot of these teams really look at their future, because from playing in the first division then going to the second division, you never know what could happen. And obviously now I'm foreshadowing what happened to a team from Paraguay that actually got relegated to the third division, who actually had a historical win over Boca Juniors in the Sudamericana game 7 years ago. So these type of games and this type of fate can change in an instant for these teams.
Yeah, that's right, Roberto. Hi, guys. Hi, everybody. The team we're talking about, Capiatá, might not even go to the third division because they're not officially registered with the Paraguayan FA. Remember, going back to when we talk about the show about the Copa Paraguay, and you have the teams from the Rural Football Union. Well, that's where Capiatá came from, and they managed to get to first division, to Primera, having come through those local leagues. So in theory, when you drop below Intermedia, you're meant to go back to your local league. What they might be allowed to do is try either some kind of rule change and go to the B, which is the third division, or more likely is register themselves with the Paraguayan FA and go to the fourth division, the C, and start from there. So that's an incredible kind of fall from the very top when you were talking about they beat Boca Juniors in the Bombonera, no less, 1-0 with Oscar Ruiz, who now plays in Bahia in Brazil. So they did that, and then it's this kind of downwards trajectory. And then so for the teams that are really fighting to not be in that kind of position is really between Sol and Luqueño. I think River Plate are probably going to be the team that gets relegated directly. It's not mathematical yet, but Sol and Luqueño are on the exact same average points in the relegation standings, because Sol won at the weekend, Luque drew, so that's put them right on the same one. And for Luqueño, it's really tough. Their next game is Guarani, I believe, the league leaders. So it's a real big fight between those two teams. Then there's the question of, can they beat Emiliano? I would say Sportivo Emiliano maybe are one of the stronger teams in Intermedia. They had a really good run to manage to get to that fourth place. So they would still hope they can hold on there. But then, it's like if you remember when River Plate of Argentina had to play Talleres, was it Talleres or Belgrano all those years ago in the relegation playoff, it could be a similar thing. You can't really prepare for these kind of one-off games that are like finals, very similar to the Super Clásico that Maria was talking about between Olimpia and Cerro. It's also one of those one-off games where, however bad Olimpia are doing, you could always see them building up to this like it's a cup final, and maybe producing a result. Form kind of goes out the window. So yeah, neither team, Sol nor Luque, want to be in that position, I think.
It can change the fortunes of any team going into this position. So obviously we will see what happens to them. But switching to obviously what we spoke about at the beginning of the show, and keeping actually to the pattern of finals, because I think with this Paraguayan national team, they do have some finals ahead. At least that's what the president, Robert Harrison, said. 6 finals left for Paraguay, which obviously equates to 6 more games for the qualification for Qatar 2022. As we talk about Guillermo Barros Schelotto, who comes in, has his introductory press conference, actually came quite late into the country. I think he was announced on a Wednesday, and then he came into Paraguay a few days later. So obviously, you know, we spoke about him and what his history and his connection is with Paraguay, what kind of manager that he is. Let's switch gears to what really is going to happen with the players that he might select. And Fede, I want to go to you on this one, because obviously, as we heard from his press conference today, I think from his press conference over the weekend, he spoke about the necessity to win, to get results, and to have the commitment of all the players there. Obviously, you know, I think he had mentioned even he wants to see that kind of garra, the mística of Paraguayan football against Chile, obviously the first game that happens in 2 weeks. So it's going to be interesting to see what type of system that he's going to play. Many people have opted that he's going to switch to a 4-3-3, which is similar to what Paraguay have been playing under Berizzo, but there are a few bit of issues that are going on. And Ralph, I think, had mentioned as well that there isn't that kind of center defensive midfielder that is typical in these type of games. But I think he is obviously going to have to utilize a lot of these players in various positions where they're strong. There had been some rumors that there might be some people who might get their first ever call up to the national team, some players who have been doing well. I can talk about what's going on with Cecilio Dominguez and Jesus Medina at MLS, who haven't gotten a call up yet ever since joining that team. So I just want your thoughts, Fede, on who do you think might get an opportunity? You know, do we see perhaps the same base of players that we have seen under Berizzo, or do we see maybe a new blood of players, you know, even this late into the qualifying process?
Well, first of all, Guillermo had to leave his vacations in the U.S. I think he made pretty good money on his last team on LA, on the Galaxy team, and he was sacked from there. So he had some time to think about everything that happened before and to see what his next step was going to be on his career. I don't think he was actually waiting for a call from the Albirroja, from our national team right now. Especially because of everything that had happened to him, to his career lately, right? I mean, losing that final in Libertadores against River was a big scar. He hadn't done well lately with Galaxy, but people are kind of feeling this new coaching staff. I'm actually surprised about, you know, the good comments and what the overall sensation is here in Paraguay around this Schelotto brothers, because they look like they're going to put some discipline into this locker room, and they're going to try to build some confidence. Also, it is a kind of a turnaround situation in this point. I mean, it was now or never, right? I mean, it could have been before. We talked about this on the last episode. Why did they take so long from the FA to change Berizzo, to take him out, to bring somebody new? Well, he's here now, Schelotto, 6 games. Maybe it won't even be 6 games. I mean, if you don't start winning, if you don't beat Chile on the next game, it probably won't be 6 games. It'll probably just be 2 games, deciding games, and the rest you're just going to have to play for something, you know, just to try to build for the next World Cup. I mean, that's the reality of this Paraguayan squad right now. If they don't win against Chile, it's going to look really bad for them. I hope that they can take this temper that we see off the pitch from them and that we've seen along their career and inject it to the players. I mean, we kind of need that in this locker room. We kind of need new players also. I do think they're going to try to put in not much of their style because there's not that much time to work on the training ground. But there is probably time to pick certain players that haven't been on the squad lately, and maybe then you can surprise the coaches you're going to go up against, and maybe that way you can find something different for the team. I mean, for the last call up, we didn't have really players on the side on our right or left backs, and we have players available on those spots right now. I mean, Beto Spinola is back. He's getting game time in Cerro Porteño. He's a right back. He was there on that position lately. We didn't have him for these last 3 games. Roberto Rojas is playing a lot. He's cruising actually in River Plate. They're on their way to a new title, and he's been playing in that position. Right back also on his club. Juan Escobar is now an option because he was tried out on these last games. Brody Ferreira from Guarani, he's killing it here. He's only 23 years old. He might be a surprise there. And I'm looking in the left side, and I'm seeing Blas Rivero is coming back in Denmark. He's playing again. Santiago Arzamendia, unfortunately, isn't playing in Cadiz. He hasn't gotten any game time in these last 3 or 4 games. That's not good news for us. But David Martinez is back there. So you got alternatives. You got players that are coming back from injuries that Berizzo couldn't count on for these last games. Hopefully, Schelotto does count on them because they were actually doing a very good job. I think I'm not worried about defense. I am worried about what can happen from midfield on, because there you can make a lot of changes. Is Gaston Jimenez still going to be called up? Are players from the MLS that weren't called up lately going to be on his list? Well, that's something that we're going to see in these next couple of days. Jesus Medina might be excited. Also, Cecilio Dominguez. I think they've had quite a good journey in this MLS season, and they might be excited. And not just them, some local players also that haven't gotten much game time with Berizzo. It could be their time. It could be their moment now in the qualifiers.
Yeah, I think one thing he likes, well, one thing he said at first, Guillermo, in the press conference, they asked him, what school of manager are you? Are you Bielcista? Are you, Bilardo, all that kind of stuff? And he said, well, I'm not really any of those. I have different experiences, I suppose, or different inspirations, in my coaching time. But the way he made it sound is he's a bit more pragmatic, and that's something Berizzo didn't do, right? Berizzo was very rigid and stuck to his plan. And then the other thing you do see through his teams that he likes is pressing very high, and that's what Paraguay have the players to be able to do, right? Angel Romero likes doing that. Almiron can do that. So they have that. The one thing I think they're missing is that kind of connection between midfield and attack, which Fede was alluding to, that we have a good base defensively. They probably won't change that much, but Paraguay haven't scored many goals. And how are they going to do that? Who's the player that can be the key? What they really need is the player we don't have anymore, is someone like Nestor Ortigosa, because that's the exact kind of player they like, is someone who's can win the ball, but is very good technically and has a good range of passing. Let's see what they do. It's to fill that position, and if they can't fill that position, is how do they work around it? Because they have plenty of players. They have the Villasanti, Hugo Martinez, Lucena, the players that can kind of do the pressing as well. But in Jorge Morel, who's played there recently, he's maybe not as technically capable as somebody they're looking for. And in a way, Berizzo had that problem too. So he tried Jimenez there, but the problem with Jimenez was he didn't have any legs at all to do any of the running, or really he was too far back on the pitch to have an impact. You need someone with a better range of passing. I mean, one guy that comes to mind that does have that really good range of passing and is also very intense is Brian Ojeda, who's he got made the bench for Nottingham Forest. He hasn't played a game yet, but then I don't know what position he's in to go to Paraguay and then have to miss games in England, because I think that's probably why he wasn't called up last time. So I'm not sure, but yeah, it will be interesting to see how he fills that gap. And I certainly think, just a quick mention of Rodi Ferreira, the right back, it's a brilliant story, because this is a kid who came in with Olympia and was really talented. He was maybe suggested he might go to Europe and all this kind of stuff, and it never happened. I think he ended up in Argentina or somewhere, then back in Paraguay, and he was actually at Capiatá. So the team we're talking about that's just been relegated to 3rd division, 3 months ago, he was playing for Capiatá. But he was lucky that his old manager, who gave him his debut at Olympia, Fernando Jubero, said, well, I could use this guy in Guarani. And there he is. He brings him in Guarani. He's playing every game. Guarani at top of the league. So it's amazing in football, how those fortunes can change so quickly. And that's what Paraguay have, that hope of something they can do. They're in a difficult position right now, but fortunes can change like that. And they could be back in the World Cup qualifying spots with a couple of wins in November.
I really think that we are going to have to wait to see how Schelotto does, and to actually judge him in the way that he will manage our team, because we only know how he's done with clubs. That's one thing, and I think this is his first time managing a country, so it's a little bit different in terms of on how you're going to coach, because your players are not there all the time. I did like that he was already hands-on and he's been visiting the youth teams. So that's a good sign. I think he's probably looking into that direction, like we have spoken about earlier. I believe it was Fede that said that, he should be looking, into the younger players to build our future. And, I think I saw him with already speaking to the Romero twins, in one of the training sessions. So that's good already, working on that. And, now that the Romero twins are not focused in a club, then they're probably focused into the next qualifiers. So that's a good thing for me. I do also like the shout out by Fede for Cecilio Dominguez. He's been doing great in Austin, and that'll be a good thing for him to bring him back, because I did think that he was a very efficient player when he was playing with us. So that's a good one, and I can't think of anybody else that hasn't, that should be coming in. But other than Cecilio, I think everyone has a decent chance now that Berizzo's not here anymore.
Well, and obviously, I think being that Guillermo has a understanding of MLS, I think I'm pretty sure he's seen matches of him. Cecilio I'm referring to, and obviously Jesus Medina, who's doing well at NYCFC, and they are players. They could play as wingers, which is something that Barros Schelotto loves to use in his team. So it certainly would be very good for both of them to make the call-up list if they do make it, obviously. And we'll definitely have to see if they are in that position to be on this team. And yeah, like you said, Moni, I think we have to just wait and see, obviously, within the next 2 weeks, with the training sessions and who comes in and what kind of team that we'll probably see. It's going to be interesting. It's obviously, we haven't had this situation ever since Berizzo joined, which was like over 2 years ago. So this is new territory for Barros Schelotto, and obviously the pressure is right there from the get-go to get the win over there in Chile. The fans are obviously going to be pressured. We're going to pressure the players and obviously the manager as well. So we'll definitely have to wait and see what happens. But let's switch gears to what's going on in the club game. As we had mentioned at the beginning, we see two teams that really are fighting for this championship, the Clausura. We have two teams that I think are very much certain going to be one of the winners of the Clausura, and that's obviously talking about Guarani and Cerro Porteño. As you had mentioned, Maria, yes, Guarani did defeat Olimpia, a match that I think really, for Cerro's case, obviously they ended up getting the win over Guarani over the weekend, but they definitely did not want that kind of result. They wanted to see, in a way, kind of cheering their bitter rivals in a match like this to get more momentum towards the league. And Ralph, I want to go to you on this one, because I think obviously we're looking at a Cerro side that has not given up, a side that has really been into the position to really fight for this. Obviously, Guarani had been top of the table for the majority of the Clausura, but Cerro just continued to keep winning and winning. But it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the Super Clásico. As I had mentioned before, yes, Olimpia are in probably the worst position in quite some time, but that just adds even more pressure to Cerro, who, they need to not just beat Olimpia, but they got to beat them convincingly. And being at La Nueva Olla with all those fans coming in, Chiqui Arces has really got to get this well prepared and perfect for this type of game on Halloween.
Yeah, it's always hard to call this, on form, because the teams, go into this as almost a game apart. So often form does go out the window. And with Olimpia, it's a strange situation in that the Olimpia team, the players, player by player, are all very good. They should be doing much better. It's just as a collective, and maybe with everything going on in the boardroom, it's kind of fallen apart this year, but on any given day, they would be good enough to win. For Cerro, I think the positive going into this is what we saw in the game against Guarani. Against Guarani, they had a very difficult game. Their goalkeeper, Jean, made a brilliant save, well, a few brilliant saves, but one particularly at 0-0, which kept them in the game. And then what I thought Arce had done is he'd found a couple of solutions, because what we've talked about before is he has a very rigid team, or a very good 11 that's slowly been pulled apart, because you have Villasanti went to Gremio. He's kind of filled that with Carrascal. It's maybe not a perfect, replacement, but it's working. And then what we saw here is Mateus Gonçalves has been temporarily suspended for a positive doping test, which was after the Guarani game, by the way. So he had to fill in on that right-hand side, and Enzo Jimenez hasn't been on great form. So what he did, he actually played Beto Espinola more as a right midfielder, ahead of the right back, Alan Benitez. And then on the left-hand side, he brought in Rivas, who's a very young player, and Rivas has filled that gap that's left by someone like Asamendia, who's moved to La Liga, and I thought he filled that gap really well. It was actually Rivas who put in the cross for the first goal, which is scored by Morales. Morales is another player that's a really good player. He scored in his last 3 games, Roberto Morales, but he's been on the bench, so he's coming off the bench and scoring these important goals, as Chiqui Arce often wants to start just with Boselli as the main focal point, and try and build up from maybe a more defensive base. But then when a game is 0-0, like in this case, he brings on Morales, and Morales has been making the difference. So, I mean, that's a positive for Cerro, that they've started to find a few solutions, maybe where we weren't sure if they did have a backup plan. And then where it gets difficult is kind of what we're talking about. All the pressure is on them. It's not going to be on Olimpia. It's all on Cerro. And from the other side, Guarani keep winning. I mean, we can talk about Fernando Juvero's record against Olimpia. He has a great record as coach of Guarani, and also when he was even at Libertad and Cerro, he often beat Olimpia. And that just kept up at the weekend with Fernando Fernandez scoring twice for Guarani, and he made the assist on the first goal as they won 3-1. So, I mean, he's a player in real good form, and Guarani are definitely the team to stop. At the weekend, Cerro will assume that Guarani are going to pick up 3 points, and they have to just keep up with them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Fede, I wanted to go to you on this one because, and obviously I want Maria's take on this, because for Olympia's case, I mean, like I'd mentioned, they've had such a horrible year. They've had, issues that's been going on for over a year, you would say, since the beginning of 2020, since the beginning of the pandemic. Their presidents getting, banned by FIFA, various players leaving, eliminations from various tournaments, just really a terrible last few 18 months, you would say, for Olimpia. And what kind of humiliation, whoever wants to go first on this one, just how embarrassing would it be for Cerro, not just to lose to this Olimpia side, but just the way that it happened after everything that had been going on. They cannot afford to win. But for Olympia's case, if they want to ruin Cerro's chances of winning a league title, even in their lowest of lows, this is the time for them to do it.
Oh, I got my answer, but I want to hear Maria's first. I want to hear Maria.
You want to put me on the spot already? Well, yeah, I think it's, for Cerro, it'll be more embarrassing than for Olimpia to keep losing. Olimpia is already kind of in the tank as of right now. So I think Cerro is probably looking at it in this way, like, we have to win, regardless of what happens, we have to win, because if not, then it looks bad on us. And for Olimpia, I think that they also have that, they have to win, because if not, there's no going out of this anymore. And they already lost their chance to continue going up into the table against Guarani, which was already a hard game, a difficult game to do with that. But for this Clásico, which is, the top game of the season, there's just no way. It's win or win for both teams.
I totally agree with Maria. It's a win-win for both of them. Cerro's going to have their fans on their side, but it could be a pressure also on them if they're not winning the match. I mean, they're going to play at home. They're going to play with their fans again. It's something that we haven't seen in the last Super Clásicos, and it's just a beautiful place to see beautiful football, which is something that I've seen lately from Cerro Porteño. If Cerro Porteño plays at 100%, if they play to their fullest, I don't think it's going to be possible for Olimpia. Olimpia has looked very fragile in defense lately, and they haven't looked very effective in front of goal. So you don't know what you're going to get from them in defense, and you don't know what you're going to get from their strikers, right? Dennis Gonzalez is coming back to being that important player in offense, but they don't have a striker right now. Roque Santa Cruz has been out for the last couple of games. Walter Gonzalez, who is another striker that could come in hot, has been coming in from as a sub. He tried with Recalde the other day. I'm talking about the coach, the new coach, Julio Cáceres, who has taken over in these last couple of games. He's still trying to get her around. He's still trying to manage to see if he can squeeze something out of the team that was very successful a couple of seasons ago, and try to end the year the best way possible, right? With these legends, with some players that have tremendous history, tremendous careers, but they are just not finding it together right now. That's why Olimpia is where they are right now in the table. And Cerro Porteño, like other clásicos, I think is the favorite right now in the preview, not just because of what the table says, just because of the way they are playing. Cerro has looked really well. Their main figure, their best player right now is Jean Paul, their goalkeeper. He's been called their best player in these last games, and he's always coming up. And then you have a very strong defense, which is back. You have Patiño, you have Alexis Duarte, who have been stable there for a while, for various seasons. In midfield, I think he has kind of managed with Alan Benitez, like Ralph was saying. He found a solution there, bringing him in because of that spot that was left by Mateos. And up front, Boselli is doing well, and especially Morales. You have a solution there. You have an ace ready if you need it in the bench. You have a player that's been coming in hot, that's always scoring and being a solution. Cerro Porteño has had tight games lately, but has always managed to come around, and in the second half usually gets those goals from the subs that are coming in. So Chiqui Arce looks like he knows what he's doing, and he's just waiting to get his chance at Guarani in that final game of the Clausura. Hopefully for them, they can have an opportunity in that last game, but for that, they just need to keep on winning.
It's going to be a heated end of the season as we head towards the end of the year and the end of the Clausura, where obviously we'll see who becomes the champion. But obviously, let's switch gears to our final topic of the night and go to someone. Actually, I want to keep to you, Fede, because obviously this is a league that is way in your wheelhouse, I should say, because obviously talking about the Intermedia that ended today officially. Obviously, we have our three teams that have been promoted. We had General Caballero of Juan León Mallorquín heading to the first division for the first time. Resistencia actually also coming back to the first division. I think it's also the first time as well. I don't remember the last time that they went, but in any case, and Tacuaru, who are back, actually, the team from Barrio Jada, returning to the first division of Paraguay, with Sportivo Ameliano playing in the playoff between the team against, obviously in that playoff against one of the worst teams in the Clausura season. So because of that, we obviously have our three relegated teams. We have General Diaz, a team that obviously we spoke about have been through various issues within their last few years. They've been relegated. Florencio Liergos as well as Deportivo Capiatá. So, Fede, just wanted your 2 cents on what you've really seen from this Intermedia. Obviously, we have General Caballero playing in the Sudamericana, which is obviously going to be for the first time that a team from the second division of Paraguay will be playing in a continental competition. So just want your thoughts on what you expected or what you assumed and got from this season, and what to expect from really these three teams or even four teams if they make it to the first division next year.
Well, first of all, it was a big surprise, the season that we saw from General Caballero, from Juan León Mallorquín. I don't think anybody was waiting to see a team with such a blowout, right? I mean, that's what actually happened from the first game to the last one. I mean, they were just the better team. They really earned it, and it's really good to see a team from the countryside that's going to play also the Sudamericana, that just elevated their game, that just got bigger and bigger with the city, and I think it's just going to help them grow and obviously the city, the fan base even. We've had teams from that region lately coming into to the first division, 3 de Febrero, which is a team from Ciudad del Este, which is close to that place also in the country, the Alto Paraná region. That's a very important place to have a fan base, to have people watching football, to have a team in first division. I love teams from the countryside coming into the first division. Unfortunately, that's not the case for Resistencia and Tacuarí, which don't have a pretty big fan base, but they are kind of traditional teams. And Resistencia, I think, was in first division back in '99, if I'm not mistaken. So they have an experience, but they are a totally different team right now. I don't know where they're going to play, actually, because their stadium is kind of in a tricky place here in Asunción. So I don't think they can build much from there. Tacuarí also, they lost their ground, which is where they played back when they were in first division. They don't have a stadium right now. These two teams were playing in different stadiums during the season. So you don't know what's going to happen to them now that they're going to have to play in the big stage, right? But I just wanted to explain maybe a little bit more so people can get to know what kind of tournament is Intermedia, the second division here in Paraguay. And then maybe Ralph can talk a little bit more about what happened on this last games and how everything turned out. But, what can be expected from a category that's barely professional? I mean, we have more amateur players than professional players that don't really make that much money. It's really hard for them. And we're talking about the second division. We're talking about a division that's right there from being a top league. So it's been kind of hard for most clubs, especially this season where you had 34 games in total and where you had to pay a lot of money for players because of everything that was on stake, especially that ticket to the Sudamericana. So a lot of teams really built up a pretty big roster, and they just couldn't deal with that on these last games. And you have a mix of young players also that go and play in this category on loan from the big teams. They actually are the ones that pay that salary, not the teams in the second division. That works correctly in the youth. Those teams that work really well in the youth leagues. I'm talking about teams like Libertad, Guarani, Cerro, Olimpia. They have so many players that they can actually give them to the second division, third division. We also see something similar in Europe, I know, and those teams and those clubs give players to the second division teams, and then you have players that have played most of their career also in second, third, or fourth division, players which are players from lower leagues. They have done their career always there. And then you have players that are probably close to their 30s that played at a certain age when they were young in first division, and now they're just going to make their career in second or third division because they never left the country, or they just didn't take pride on their best moment, right? They couldn't make that jump to the next step. And then you have players that were just left out without clubs in first division. Let's remind everybody that we only had 10 teams this year in the first division. So there were a lot of players that couldn't find a club and just had to go to play for the second division. The second division that's over now in October, and now you got to wait until at least February, maybe even April for the next season to start. That's a long time for these guys. Most of these players go back to their countryside, go back to their towns and play in lower leagues, in even smaller leagues in the countryside. That's how they make their money in these months that they are not working, because they don't get paid from their clubs. So now with this tournament, it's always a controversy the way it ends because of the issues with the financial situation. A lot of clubs didn't have their players available for these last games. That was a big issue because there were teams that were still playing for big things, and they were going up against teams that just didn't play it serious, and it's not enough money that they get from the FA. They only get 600 million guaranis, which somebody can convert there. It's not enough money really to even pay for the salaries, or to keep up the stadium, to keep up the home ground like you're supposed to. So it's very hard from the budget point of view. I totally get that from the people that run these clubs, but you have a lot of problems to really build up a team and to try to get to the first division. That's why a lot of people say that the second division here in Paraguay is the toughest division of them all, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's similar to England's championship. Roberto put put it here in the chat as we were talking, because you see a lot of teams from the championship that actually end up doing quite well in the Premier League. Brentford this year is an example, Leeds the season before, because you do have to work so hard to get out of this division. Just a quick note before we talk about the last of the season, Resistencia's ground that Fede mentions, it is in the Chacarita area of Asunción, so it's kind of one of the most populous areas, but also one of the most dangerous areas in terms of crime. And this year, the visiting teams, there's been 2 or 3 occasions where they've parked the bus next to the police station nearest to the ground, and it's still been robbed. I mean, I've been told this by journalists, but also by board members at clubs. So this is, it's a huge security issue, and for sure, your Olimpia, Guarani, Cerro, they're not going to go and play a game there. No way. They'll be petitioning the FA to make sure it's on a neutral ground. But yeah, going to the precarious economic situation and how that's affected, especially today. Today was the last round of games, and you do have that issue where in such a big league, there's going to be teams that have nothing left to play for. They're not going to get promoted, they're not going to be relegated. And that happened specifically in 2 games. 2 de Mayo were playing against San Lorenzo, and Ameliano, who we've mentioned, were playing against Itenio. And San Lorenzo actually had something to play for, because if by some magic reason Emiliano lost and they won by enough goals, I think if they won by 6 goals, they could have snuck into that playoff spot, but on goal difference. So what happened was San Lorenzo did win by 6 goals. In fact, they won by 7. They won 8-1 today against an Itenio team that was made up of only under 18s players, and they didn't even have a full squad. They only had 3 substitutes on the bench. Also in the other game, the Emiliano game against Itenio, sorry, I said Itenio, I meant 2 de Mayo. There was a 2 de Mayo put out there under 18s and just 3 subs. And then Itenio also put out basically a youth team against Emiliano. And by playing these very weakened teams, it obviously devalues from the competition. So the Paraguayan FA themselves have released a statement to say they will be looking into this, because having weakened teams there's 2 things. There's one, there's Fede's part of the story, which is correct, that sometimes what they try and do at the end of the season, the presidents, is to save money. They kind of just cut the contract, say there's nothing left to play for, we're not going to pay you, so you might as well not play. So the senior players, that specifically happened at Itenio, who the president of the club said that the players actually went to his house during the week to threaten him because he wasn't paying their last month's salary. But then you have a problem that these games are all offered on international betting markets. You can bet on this in the UK. So of course, Paraguay's had a problem with match fixing, with FIFA banning the former president of Olimpia for match manipulation. And so these games, having these very strange results and not playing full teams, can also affect that side of things. Gambling is legal in Paraguay, it's illegal in Brazil. So there's a lot of Brazilian people come to Paraguay to gamble as well. Remember that too. I mean, this is a big business. So there's an issue, I think, that the Paraguayan FA are concerned about, is that this can look into, could be a problem for match manipulation as well. Because, it's one thing, it could be that the players were told not to play because we're not going to pay you, or was it that there was some kind of incentive? So they're going to investigate that, and they released a statement today. But where do you go? Yeah, it's very difficult. The gaps between the budgets are huge for Intermedia, as Fede is talking about. I think 600 million guaraníes is like a little less than $100,000. And then Cerro Porteño, who are looking for a new president at the moment, or there's going to be elections for president, they're talking about budgets of $12 to $15 million that they need annually. So I mean, the difference between second division and then trying to compete at the top in Primera is a huge gap, much bigger than I think what we see in Europe as well. So it's a difficult one to fix. Fix as in fix the problem, not fix the game, just to clarify that. Is a difficult, it's a structural issue that you have to go go working on. But the first thing, and I think the best thing, is going back to 12 teams in Primera. So also having just 10 teams this year because of the pandemic, that obviously made that pyramid even smaller at the very top. So at least we're expanding back to 12, and there are plans to eventually expand, I think, to 14 teams in Primera.
It'll be interesting to see what happens from the Intermedia, and how this affects obviously teams that are eventually promoted and how they have to really deal with getting into the Primera. We'll definitely see what happens in 2022. So, obviously great stuff on what's going on in the Intermedia, guys. And, obviously this is the perfect way to close another great episode of Guarani Vision. We want to thank everyone for tuning in as always, and we'll always be focusing on what's been going on in the Paraguay game as we get World Cup qualifiers heated up. Obviously the end of the competitions in the Clausura and other competitions as well. Copa Paraguay also coming to an end very soon. So we'll be sticking towards that. And, a perfect way to close the episode for myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, Maria Britos, and Ralph Hanna. Thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.